Hello and welcome to GHHU 2901 Online Research for College Students. This is our sixth lecture in a series of 10. This week we're going to talk a little bit about evaluating information. Basically, how do you know if something is good or bad? How should you think about approaching a source to use it in your paper? What criteria do you use to determine if something is trustworthy or something isn't? This lecture is actually one of our shorter lectures, but we're going to jump right in. So, first things first, welcome to week 6. We are over the hump for the course. This is actually kind of a great week to take a moment, take a breath, breathe, reflect on everything that you've learned so far, catch up on any of the quizzes that you may not have submitted. Last week, we talked about the library being the go-to place for your papers, for your research, that you really should not pay for articles online. You know, the library is kind of like your Netflix. We can go out and make these collections of articles and journals and all sorts of kind of information, make it available to you. If we don't have it, Gill Express is available to you, and we can go and borrow it from libraries within the university system or worldwide. And academic libraries are organized similarly to bookstores. We use Library of Congress, which is a subject-based organization scheme. And you can go out and when you look on the shelves, post-pandemic and everything is all safe and everyone's vaccinated, you can notice that there are books on the same topic to the left of the book you want and to the right of the book you want. So, don't be just focused on pulling that one book. Make sure you look around the book that you want. Thinking about the kinds of sources that are out there, because we've talked about using Google, we've talked about using the library. Both of those sources are going to have things that are scholarly and things that are popular. So knowing the difference between these two is very helpful for your research, because you'll often hear your professor say, find me 5 scholarly articles. And oftentimes they don't really explain what scholarly article means. So thinking about what isn't a scholarly article, thinking about popular articles. These are things that are in magazines that are kind of written for general audience that anyone can just kind of pick up and jump right into. They're usually fewer than 5 pages in length, although I've seen some that are longer. They're written by a journalist or a staff writer. Sometimes you don't even know who wrote it. It just appears in the magazine. Wired, Popular Mechanics, Vogue, things like that. They're written for a common language. They're written in a lower grade level, meaning like 9th to 12th grade reading level. There's almost no works cited page, and they're not peer reviewed, meaning that someone has not read the article and said it was of quality, and that person was qualified to do so. Usually there's an editor who's going to look at it for typos and general truthiness, but it doesn't go through a robust peer review process. Scholarly articles, on the other hand, are usually not long, but they're certainly longer than 5 pages. They're written by an expert author, someone who is credentialed in the field, who has years of experience in it, or has a master's degree or a doctorate. They're written in a formal or technical language. It's written for people who kind of know about the field. There's a biography or a works cited page. There's a reference list. That's super important, because then you know that the person isn't just making things up, that they're relying on established information to make points. It's also peer-reviewed. It goes through this robust process. This is typically where someone would write an article and then send it to a journal. The journal then would send it out to 2 or 3 other people who are experts in the field to read it, review it, comment on it, and offer suggestions for revision. That process is one of the reasons why science and scholarly communication move slowly. Remember, we talked about the information timeline and how scholarly articles, in the best case, are going to take 3 to 6 months? This is why, because of peer reviewed. We saw during the pandemic an interesting development happen where that got significantly sped up. And some of the articles weren't peer reviewed. They were reviewed by peers in real time, meaning people were submitting comments on the article as a more crowdsourced kind of thing. Other journals sent it through a more rapid peer review process because the information was so pressing to get out there as soon as possible. So if you look at this, there is a difference between these two. Scholarly articles tend to just be more trustworthy. They go through a quality assurance process that helps ensure the information in the article earns its place in your paper. So, peer review. Mentioned this a lot, gave you a little bit, but here's the proper formal definition. So in academic publishing, peer review is the gold standard. It's there to assess the quality of articles. Authors write their article. I sit down, I write a paper, I think this is good. I'm going to send it to the Journal of Information Literacy. Whoever is the editor of that journal is going to forward it out, and they're going to send it to experts in the field. Those experts are supposed to be impartial reviewers, meaning they don't know who wrote the article, and the person who wrote the article doesn't know who they are. It's called a blind peer review. These reviewers look over the manuscript, they read it very carefully, they look for errors, they look for things to be accurate, and they basically say, yeah, this is good research, or no, this is not such good research, and here's why. More than likely, they send suggestions for revisions. Suggestions there is a generous word. They basically say you need to revise this. The editor then accepts or rejects the manuscript based on the peer recommendations. Now, this is simplistic. There's usually a lot more that goes into this. But at the end of the day, someone looks at the article, someone writes an article, they send it to an editor, the editor sends it to peers to review. The peers make comments, those comments go back to the author incorporates those into the article, and then the editor can accept or reject it after all those revisions. Lots of articles do not make it through this process. The ones you read that are peer-reviewed is just a small percentage of the ones that are written. Furthermore, a lot of articles are just rejected out of hand. It's called a desk rejection. And that's where they basically say, okay, we got your article, but it doesn't fit the scope of the journal, or we're just not interested in publishing it. That is fairly common. So what I want you to understand is that when you're searching a database and you click that peer review article, you really are getting things, or that peer review box, you really are getting articles that have gone through a very rigorous process. And you, as the researcher, you benefit from that because now you know things that you're reading are valid, that they've been through a review, and that it is good, trustworthy information. When articles are peer-reviewed, or when you're looking at a peer-reviewed article, there are some questions you should ask yourself. Basically, who sponsored this journal? Is this journal sponsored by Big Tobacco, or is this sponsored by the American Cancer Society? Is it a professional organization? Do they have a slant? Is there something that an organization would want to publish to get out there that maybe isn't ethical or maybe doesn't have true scientific goals in mind? Is there an abstract at the beginning? You'll notice as you look at more articles, most of them have this short little abstract at the beginning. And all that is it's a paragraph written by the author about the article. But if it's a peer-reviewed article, it's going to have an abstract. Is the tone that the author uses thoughtful, restrained, serious? Are they taking their subject matter seriously? Because often when someone who has an advanced degree in the field writes an article, they're going to approach it with kind of reverence, right? They're going to talk about things that are important to them in a serious way. You always should look if the article has footnotes or citations. Peer-reviewed articles will always have footnotes or citations. That's kind of one of the main reasons why academics publish articles. They want to get cited. They want other people to use their work to further science. Are the author's credentials listed? If they're not, that's usually a big red flag. Most authors are going to list their name at a minimum, but they're going to list their degrees. They're going to list where they work. Are they an assistant professor at, a university? Or do they work for a think tank? Those things are usually listed in the article. And finally, you'll notice a lot of these articles have those words, original research, printed right on the top. That usually means that someone's gone out and they've conducted an experiment or they've done some thought and then they've put this out there as original research. Sometimes the information can be out there that's a personal opinion, but that's not usually peer-reviewed. Usually that's something like a letter to the editor, which would not fall under the scope of peer review. So peer review is great, specifically for scholarly articles. However, not everyone uses scholarly articles in every single source or every single paper. Many times, we use a website or we go and we find information that maybe isn't peer-reviewed but could be trustworthy and could be used in a paper. That's where we come in with the CRAP test. And I'm not making this up. This is what it's called. And it's really just to help you remember these letters right here. So when you're looking at a source, you've got to consider, how current is this? Am I reading an article from the 50s or am I reading an article from the 2020s? Odds are there's going to be a different take on information. If you were reading an article on family life that was published in the 50s versus family life that was published in the 2020s, it's going to be different. Usually, your professors will tell you, don't use anything older than 5 years or 10 years. But at a minimum, you want to be aware of when the article was published. And next up, you want to think about relevance. So, is this information really relevant to your topic? Who's the audience? Is it at an appropriate level? Are you looking at an encyclopedia article, or are you looking at a website from the CDC? That's something I think most people do automatically, right? They filter things out based on relevance. You're going to know when you see a source, is this relevant to my question? Who is this written for? Is this appropriate? Relevance, most people kind of just do automatically. Authority is one that does take a little bit of looking at. So you want to ask yourself, who wrote this? Why? What are their credentials? Is there contact information? Does the URL tell us anything? Is it a .org, .edu, .net, anything like that? Authority, you really just want to be sure that the source you're using is A, identifiable, and B, has a good reason to be publishing the information. That you're not just relying on like a troll, right? That there's a person behind it who's identifiable. Accuracy. So this is where peer review comes in and is handy. But again, not every source is going to be peer reviewed. So you've got to be a little more in tune with finding out the accuracy. Is the article reliable? Is it truthful? Is it correct in the content? If you're spotting things that are incorrect in what the article says, odds are I wouldn't trust the rest of the article. So you want to look for like language and tone. Is it biased? Is it not? Can you verify the information in another source? That's actually a big one. We call that triangulation, where you want to see if this source says one thing, do other sources say it too? So accuracy, you want to make sure sources that you use in your paper are accurate. And then lastly, purpose. This is one of my favorites. Ask yourself, why does this information exist? And this is one of the reasons why I like articles. Because I know in higher ed there is an entire incentive system for people to publish articles that are truth, that are peer-reviewed, that are great in relevance, in currency, in accuracy, all of these. And it's written because the person wants to, be promoted or contribute to their field or things like that. That's a motive, sure, but we've worked hard to align those motives that they can be a little altruistic, that they can be focused on the betterment of humanity. As opposed to, say, an article published by the Tobacco Institute, right, which was funded and paid for by Big Tobacco. They put out research. That research had a purpose. I just don't know how accurate or trustworthy that was. And where that information came from certainly mattered in what they were putting out. So you want to ask yourself, why does that information exist? And so next up, confirmation bias. This is actually one of the newer things that I will kind of iterated in this course to talk about. Confirmation bias is one of those things that we look for sources that agree with us. We favor things that fit within our own existing information schema. If new information comes and it forces us to reevaluate what we think about ourselves, we're more likely to reject the information. That's a little bit of a problem, because when new information comes out, sometimes it does just scrutinize our current thoughts of our beliefs. It challenges us. That doesn't mean that it's wrong. That doesn't mean we should reject it out of hand. It means we should take this new information and work through our own thought process about how do our beliefs or our ideas or our interpretation of the world evolve with new information. There's actually a great article on confirmation bias in D2L for you to read this week. In light of this lecture being a little light, I put an extra reading in D2L for you. It is worth it. It is not a heavy read. It's not a super peer-reviewed article, but it does a good job with talking about confirmation bias. This is an image from the top of that article. And even if you have good information habits, and based on the discussion forums that we did in like week 1 or 2, I think many of us do have good information habits. You still probably fall into this sometimes, especially if you're not thinking about it actively. So you have an existing belief. And this is the universe of all of your existing beliefs. This is who you are. And this is the universe of all the facts and all the evidence that exists out there. Usually, the Google results that are going to get you to click and get you to share are the things that overlap here. Meaning, I believe something, I found this source that says what I believe is right, so I'm going to share it. And over here, the stuff that I believe, but maybe isn't backed up with facts and evidence, are being hidden by Google and various conspiracy theories. The world powers do not want these beliefs to be true. And then there's on the other side, the information out there that exists, but I don't believe in it. I'm just going to ignore that. I might also think maybe that's a conspiracy theory. But this is the sweet spot right here. These are the results I share. These are the results I read. These are the results I think about. So I want you to think about this, and I want you to read that article, and I want you to just kind of ask yourself, what does that do to my information ecosystem? Am I comfortable with the cognitive dissonance of knowing that I believe something and the facts and evidence run counter to it? Or maybe don't even address that particular belief? Am I okay having thoughts and opinions that are not fact-based? I think we all should be, frankly, because, not everything needs to be fact-based, certainly when we're talking about human thoughts and emotions and beliefs. But it's pretty good, too, to have some evidence that backs you up. And I think we all should have an open mind when it comes to finding new information and evidence and facts that challenge our beliefs. Because what we're going to do is work against some of that confirmation bias. So, I promised you this week would be short. This is not a cat. This is actually Lola the Beagle. This was, I bet about 10 years ago. She has not had that particular tone of brown in her fur in a long time. But she's still around and hugged every day by two little kids. There is no quiz this week. That is our lecture. Please read that article and do me a favor. Go back, and if you haven't completed any of the quizzes, make sure they're all completed. If you need anything, let me know. Spring break should be coming up pretty soon. And so when we get there, I want to make sure you have all of your quizzes and everything else submitted. All right, all. That's it. Thank you, and have a wonderful week.